would like, before asking the people asking questions, I'd like more or less how this project came from the film, not the theater piece exactly. How you were interested in coming to see, to put on this documentary, this fantastic, to see how this work of art in a way brings to life, comes to life, and that's what I'd like to ask you first.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting the film, for inviting us, and thank you for your warm reception. The project, the film was an idea of Marina Abramovic. She asked me to she asked Bob Wilson, as you saw in the film, to make a show of her life, of her funeral and of her life. And while Bob Wilson asked Willem to perform in the show, Marina asked me to make a film about it. You know, Marina is fantastic as an actress, and not only she didn't give me any instructions, but once she trusts you, Marina and I have been friends for almost 18 years now. So on one hand, she kind of maternally, she's protective and treats me obviously in a very affectionate and very maternal way. But on the other one, once she puts herself and her work in your hands, she trusts you completely, and she says all the time, just tell me what to do, I'll do whatever you want, I'll become whatever you want me to be. And of course, I saw that she did this with Bob Wilson every day while they were working on this, and it was pretty hard for her because Bob clearly creates a world that it's the opposite world of Marina's work. So as they, expressed in some of the interviews, Marina, before making this show, hated the theater. She thought everything was so fake and artificial. And for example, I remember one day, and unfortunately I didn't film this, Marina in the beginning of the rehearsals, the first day that Bob realized he wanted Marina sitting down on a square, something square on the stage. So Marina said, looked at this stage and said, Bob, can I at least have, I don't know, something like ice? At least, can I sit on a cube of ice, actually? So, this idea of torture or whatever that comes from her performances. And Bob was like, of course, Marina, tomorrow you're going to sit on a piece of ice. And the next day she goes, she sees the cube, and she sits down all happy, and then, she stands up like if it was disgusting. And she's like, Bob, but this is not ice, it's plastic. And it's like, of course, Marina, do you think I would let you, get wet and your costumes wet for the whole show just to let you sit on a piece of ice? So this was the kind of contrast that they were constantly dealing with. And of course, for me, it was easier because I didn't, put anything against Marina's work or Bob's needs or whatever. I just tried to be as invisible as possible. Bob hasn't seen the film yet, and I have to thank him for this because he was very sweet from the beginning in order to let me free to do whatever I wanted and not get in the way. He said it to my producer. He said, Max, I'm not going to watch anything until it's finished and everybody has seen it, and so that I cannot say anything, because I know I'm a bold bastard, and I know, that I can then disappoint Giada or, and I don't want to. So he was very generous that way. Also, Bob is famous for wanting total silence around him and pure concentration. As you see, he works in a very meticulous way. He's very detailed. So I was aware of that, and I've been very careful from the beginning. not to make me, even visible, or to be in the way in any way. And I had to find a strategy to get interviews from him, because until I was shooting rehearsals, I found my way to, to be invisible. But when it came to interviews, Bob hates interviews, and he says it all the time. And he said it to me, I don't know, tens of times. And I'm like, okay, but we're not going to do interviews, but just a conversation here and there, just so you tell me what's going on with you. So I had to invent a way to basically ask questions without them sounding like questions, because otherwise he wouldn't answer. And that's what came out. But in the end, I was so happy with the result, because in each interview, and we did a bunch, at some point something clicked and he started talking, and I was like, oh, thank God. Sometimes it would take 10 minutes and sometimes an hour. But I always think that is very inspiring when finally he gets to talk about his work, or because he's not academic in any way, and sometimes he's not even necessarily articulate, meaning, is not explicit about his work. But he'll tell you stories. In the beginning you think, why is he telling me this story? And then you end up realizing that, for example, remember when he talked about the story of this psychiatrist filming the mothers going to pick up the babies, right? He started to tell me the story, and I was like, I wonder where this is going to end. And then in the end, that was the story he told, and I realized that in every single show of his, there's that gesture, that that expression that he makes. So all of a sudden I knew where it came from, and it opened a whole new world of interpretation for me, at least. In the beginning, I thought this was a very, very difficult task to make this film. For this very reason, that I thought, you know what, it's much easier when you write your own script and you have your own agenda and you tell the actors what to do and you have control of your set, than to sneak in and start spying on these people and somehow form a point of view and tell that story with your own point of view without being invasive or disrespectful of their point of view, and in this case especially of Bob's, being Bob the author of the show. But then I realized that all I was interested in was to open a window, a door, whatever, that would let me experience in a deeper way what I was watching, and eventually would let the audience experience that. And I call that intimacy. And actually I realized that in this difficult task, I was given very good elements to make it easier for me. One was, I always make, my cinema is always very personal and very intimate. That's all I'm interested in. I'm never, I hate even the word professional. I'm not interested in distancing the material that I'm working with. So the fact that Marina was such a dear person to me, and so I had a close relationship to her to start with, and Willem being my husband, of course, he was also a very intimate person. Bob was, someone I admired deeply, 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 and I was really interested in seeing how his process is when he works. Anthony is so emotional that, he touches you personally very easily as well. So these were conditions that made it much easier for me, because I realized, okay, I want to do this as a personal diary, as a journal. Without judging anything, but just trying to open, and that was my point of view. So
I used to fight with Marina just for fun, talking about the difference between performance and acting. I don't think there's a lot of difference. They're both performing. Acting is, kind of the big circle. Performing's a smaller circle in that. I think that's when she describes, you have to be an enemy of the theater. I know what she's talking about. she doesn't know that much about theater, is the truth. And the other truth is, I felt some sort of connection with her because we both use ourselves as material, and you know, we both have a physical approach, and we both hope for some sort of transformation in the doing. So I didn't feel that far away from her. And as far as artificiality, Bob has a very precise language. I've always liked that language. I didn't know what it would be like to be a performer using that language, but I was quite happy with it because it's quite an articulate language, and I came to recognize that he would deny anything natural. And when you take away natural behavior, it keeps a kind of tension and a certain kind of concentration that really elevates the performance. And I'm on the stage a lot, and there are certain conventions, but you have to invest them with an energy that's good performance energy. So I appreciated his love for the artificial. And anytime you'd have a natural movement or you'd relax, he'd call you on it. He'd come after you. And so I begin to realize it's not through reality, you know, it's through artificiality that you can get it to a more profound truth, and you can get to a more articulate truth. Because to go through things recognizable to find truth, a kind of natural manner, I think you get caught up in a lot of psychology and personality. This strips it of personality. This gets straight to the point of, you know, physics, color, light, movement, and that's what he's great at, and that's the power of the theater. It's not psychology, it's not literature, it's really about seeing stuff, you know, change your perception.
You knew that Giada was shooting there, and I don't know if you were seeing the material she was doing or something, but there was no interference of this movie in the work you made in the theater. It was completely out of the
I pretended she wasn't there, and her job, as she said, was to be invisible. You know, we were very stressed. We were making a piece. And one thing that I don't know if you recognize from watching this, Bob's a freak. He requires you to be in full makeup and full costume in rehearsal. Not from day one, but when you get really into rehearsals, because lighting is so important to him, and he feels like he can't see what it is unless it is as it's going to be. So, we don't, yeah, this is all rehearsal footage, you know, that you see in the film. That's why sometimes I don't know my lines, and sometimes the performance and the singing isn't so good. It got better later. I said, Giada, you know, you gotta write something at the bottom saying this is rehearsal footage. My pride was hurt. Oh God, I lost my train of thought now, as it should be. What was it? You asked.
making the film at the same time.
Oh yeah. No, you know, Giada, I've worked with her before in her features, and I always, you know, she's the director, I get out of the way. And in this case, yeah. And besides, I had my hands full. I couldn't worry about her. I couldn't help with her. I couldn't scold her. I couldn't do anything, you know. She was on her own. I was on my own, next to each other. And that wasn't bad.
You don't have many opportunities of working and to Giada.
What changed about your perception about Marina after doing this play about her life and death? Both of you.
I think this adventure, let's say this experience, changed everybody who worked on it, starting from Marina, you know, from Bob, and ending with me as an observer. But it was a real life-changing experience I really think for all of us. Not necessarily in my, speaking for myself, in my perception of Marina, but Marina for the first time became, in front of my eyes, kind of a mirror. And I think that as an artist, she works very much as a mirror for, you know, the audience, for society, or whatever we want to call it. Her, I don't know if you know about her performance in MoMA, where she sat, you know, for 100 days or something, 7 hours a day, right, a long time, in front of one person at a time and all that. That's really, even the title, the artist is present, that's really what it is. I mean, the artist is present, the artist is not only Marina in this case, but it's the audience. And in this case, for the first time, she was doing that with her own life, thanks to Bob's work, of course. But she was doing it with her biography instead of her work. So I really reflected myself, or projected myself and my story in her biography, as Willem says in the film, or other people said before. I think the whole show really worked that way, even if your own childhood has nothing to do, hopefully, with hers, because hers was so tragic, but I mean, the punctual facts can be very different, but it has this power of everybody can empathize and everybody can identify with her thanks to this show, and that happened to me too, so that was the first time it happened with Marina.
The only thing, you know, Marina valued the way of giving yourself over to someone else's control. You know, she said it in the documentary, but that was really a big deal for her, because she's someone that grew up in a tradition where she really made her own way. Think of her, you know, in the early 70s making work in Belgrade. A woman doing very difficult work with very little support, and that's the way she made work for a long time. She's become very successful now, but she's had to control things, she's had to be responsible for everything. And here was a case where she really did it for Bob rather than herself. And I think she valued that, because it gave her a new, you know, it freed her.
You know, I think it might be interesting for you to know that Marina is very much someone who's constantly exploring. And as an artist, she never likes to repeat herself or her work, which is kind of rare if you think about it. I mean, in contemporary art, when someone is successful doing something, you know, they tend to do it over and over again. She does exactly the opposite. For example, one day, I remember I was probably 20 years old, she told me she was in a crisis because she didn't know what to do next, what her work should be about, to continue, no? Her exploration. And so in the end, she decided to go to hypnosis, to be hypnotized, so that she said, you know what, that might give me a source of new work, you know, new inspiration, and it would come from inside me. I'm not gonna steal it from someone else, you know, because hypnosis can do this, can open a door inside yourself, and you go pick something, and then bloom, and you work on that. So I thought this would be interesting for you to know, because it's something that not necessarily comes out of her biography or of her work.
It's interesting that you mentioned this, because the question that I wanted to ask has to do with, we've seen in the documentary this sort of build-up of an atmosphere of, I wouldn't call it a sort of a trance, but at least a state of mind that would put you into a sort of a space, an environment, a sort of another reality. So I was wondering, You've made the premiere in Manchester. You've repeated for 3 or 4 times, and then it took some time until the performance was shown again. It was shown in Madrid, but also commissioned the documentary. How is it then to enter into this state of mind, to portray, to exactly trying always to understand how to produce an atmosphere, how to put the body inside of that state? How is it to go back to this intense atmosphere?
Just the chronology is, we did a workshop in Madrid, we had this material, we got the people in the room, we started to stage it. Then we broke for a little while, just to kind of get the rough mise en scène, just see what the events were. Then in Manchester, we brought the musicians in, put the music together, we started putting lights on the place. Then we went to the next step, and then Madrid, we finished it. So it was kind of a linear thing. With all the breaks, you know, you become like a dog. You're trying to connect the little pieces. You're trying to match associations to what you did before and then build on them. So it was kind of a progressive thing. It is difficult to make things with those huge breaks, but it was just a practical thing that we couldn't sit around for 6 months and, you know, work on this thing. I'm not sure that answers your question, but I don't think I haven't answered your question.
Do you feel that the physical language that you were talking just now, it's like a very potent way to reveal human nature? And when you see yourself performing, you know, now when you see yourself in a movie, in a film, do you think that you and the other people that you're in, you're very close to revealing what human nature is all about with this physical kind of language? Thank you.
I don't know.
This is a dialogue, so I can sort of continue. Okay, yeah, it's because I was curious about, because you said that theater language, I mean, I don't know anything about it. It's very physical.
You know, when you're doing anything, you need a form. This is a form. Robert Wilson has been working on this language. When I say a language, it's really a series of gestures, a series of tendencies, a series of things that he thinks are archetypes, and he plays around with them. He adjusts them, and that's his language. That's you know, that's his communication. That's what he thinks is kind of essential, and that's the rough cutout. You take that, you get to know it, and that gives you your structure. And whenever you have a strong structure, then all that energy that goes through, you know, is freed. Your mind is freed from making a certain kind of decisions and can be applied to a certain kind of quality of being there in the performing. And that's what's interesting to me, because the truth is, that's the most important thing about performing to me. It's the quality of being there and the quality of receptiveness. That's what, when you watch performers, that's what I think is electric. They're like super responsive people. And when you have a strong form, it's easier to cultivate that kind of concentration and that kind of receptivity.
Thank you.